Hello and welcome. So this is our third video in the series. So you should be able to find the first video quite easily. If you can't, go back to the channel, main channel page and find all the videos there and everything related. And they should be in a nice order. Um, so blood brother Cain and Abel. So we were actually. So we finished off in the last video looking at the Hebrew term blood and what that means. So obviously, blood is the two-letter Hebrew word dam. That comes from, in the case of our train of thought, from the three-letter Hebrew root Adam, meaning us or people, translated human beings. If you want to be sexist, stick the man in there. Which comes from the word Adamah, meaning ground. So we finished off with blood. So we're going to finish this whole idea of ground in this video and move on to the next word, which I think is field. So anyway, we're going to look at brother and we're going to look at Cain and Abel. We're just going to do a quick review. Before we do, there are slides now. So there are slides for every video. If you looked previously at a video, there hasn't been slides, it should be now attached. Well, it will be now attached to the description. So that's a link. That link's in the description below. So go into the description, click on the link. So if you want, you can follow the video or the narration that I'm speaking now via the slides rather than the video, and then use the slides however way you want. As someone once said, well, someone didn't want to say, but you can rip them up, tear them up, use them however you want. As someone once said, you can even put your grandmother's name on it. So, yeah, do whatever you want with it. It's yours for the keeping. Okay, so just a quick review. So we kind of haven't really got, I think, nothing we discussed too profound that we get basically stuck theologically, but we've expressed a lot of new ideas and new definitions of words that we wouldn't have necessarily known existed, and certainly not in the way, the method, we didn't know that existed. So just a quick recap, and this is so we don't get lost, just in case, because we have discussed a lot of things, and I'm well aware that it could be a little bit overwhelming. So just to make sure you're not overwhelmed. So there are three important ideas related to the word dam, blood. So just because I'm saying that doesn't mean that those are the only three, and they might not even necessarily be the only important ideas in the concept of what we're looking at in terms of how the sower they are. So silence, likeness, and destruction. So silence, likeness, and destruction. So those were the three key definitions we got out when we looked at the word dam and what it means in Hebrew. So just a quick, simple thing to recap. We always need to not forget this. Hebrew always, and when we say always, mean always. That means without fail. That means it never. Hebrew never doesn't do this. It describes function. It's primarily interested in function. If we don't see the function of anything, if we're looking at the Hebrew, then we don't understand it. That's the simplest way to understand what I'm trying to say. So within that understanding of function, we find purpose. So the important concept there is if silence and likeness and destruction is important to what we're studying, then what's the function of these three words? And when we find the function, we can understand the purpose. And what we'll see reflected in the end is it's just this whole idea is just reiterated in the story of Cain and Abel, and that's why the story of Cain and Abel exists where it does, to point that out. So that's a good point, actually. Obviously, every single idea in the Bible doesn't have a story, but all the important ones do. So if we then do find a story like Cain and Abel related to some of the stuff we looked at in relation to ground, then that story can't contradict what we think we understand. And if it does, we've got a problem. So that's a good double back. If you do find a story, go, this is the original story about what we're studying, we should find what we understand in that, and if we don't, we have a problem. So always bear that in mind. So because it's function, we've always got to look at function. So because we're looking at the term blood, and we finished looking at the term blood, it's what you call concretely blood, which I'll explain in a bit, but also scientifically. So basically, scientifically, we look out in the world, we see a picture. What's the scientific reasoning behind that picture? And not in a very complex way, like how atoms and stuff made, what's the speed of light, stuff like that. Just stuff we can see and observe and understand. So that's what you call more concrete thinking, or just concrete. So we use these phrases, concrete and abstract, a lot. So Hebrew is completely 100% concrete thinking. So concrete is what you experience with your five senses. So that in a Hebrew way of thinking, they understand the world by experiencing life through their senses. There is no separate abstract thinking from concrete thinking like there is in Western culture. So that's our main big problem actually with the way we approach what we're doing, and the way we're doing it is like it's completely foreign and alien to our normal way of thinking. It's not that they contradict, it's just that they're poles apart, and the way they seemingly contradict, though they don't, is they just look at things from a completely different perspective. So it's not a matter of contradiction, it's a matter of which is the correct perspective. And what I'd say is like the Hebrew way is breathed by God, not breathed by man. So that would be the correct perspective. Whether that's right or wrong doesn't really matter, because that's the Hebrew perspective, and that's the perspective the Bible was written from. So if we understand that perspective, we get more out of it. So and that goes without saying. So abstract thinking, obviously things we don't understand and we understand in an abstract way. I'm not going to discuss that. So in terms of blood function, so we introduced the idea of blue blood and red blood, and a process where the blood is oxygenated and it's red, and then it gives life to the body, it becomes blue because the oxygen's taken out of it. So in a concrete way of looking at it, that's breath, begins with breath, oxygen, and ruach. Now, in Hebrew, abstract thinking, everything in an abstract way. So here it's heart, thoughts, and feelings is understood through the concrete. They're not separate. So again, that's a big difference. So we separate those in Western thinking. The two aren't the same, whereas the two are the same in Hebrew thinking. So in Hebrew thinking, actually, the heart not is just feelings in terms of how we'd see the heart abstractly in the Western concept, but it's also the mind, it's thoughts. So it's thoughts and feelings. In a Hebrew world, Hebrew universe, the mind doesn't do anything. The mind's not attributed to do anything for whatever reason. So the processes we understand in a Western way of thinking that the mind does, the heart does. So in terms of Hebrew, the heart does what to us the mind does, but also does to us what the heart does. So you get both thoughts and feelings from a Hebrew concept. And obviously, the whole idea of what we're saying is that we've got two different lives. So we've got a physical life, and we've got a kind of abstract way of living as a human being that no other part of creation can live, because no other part of creation is created like we are. Okay, so the blood needs something else to provide life to Adam, and that's why we get the definition of silence. So on its own, the blood is silent. It needs something to act out of the blood to give life to living, to existence. So concretely, that is the respiration system. And abstractly, that's the same system but uses thoughts and feelings. So basically, in the concrete or practical system, the blood with the oxygen gives life to the body can then move and do stuff and live and exist. Um, in a abstract way of thinking, um, which is, and this is the point, we separate those two, but the Bible doesn't. It's the blood that gives life to what makes a human being, and allows us to interact in in the world and with the world in a higher way than other forms of creation. Actually, in terms of creation, the highest way is what separates us from everything else in creation. Um, this ability to do this. Okay, so bear that one in mind. So likeness. Our purpose is to be like. So again, we have the concrete and the abstract. So a brother and sister. So practically, we share the DNA. Okay, and that obviously is from our parents. And to be a brother or sister, or even a half brother or sister, we have to have the same DNA from one or two parents. At least one, usually two. The biblical definition would be two parents, so we share exactly the same set of DNA. And that's why partly we're looking at brother as a word, so we can see if we can get anything out of that. And we're also our purpose is to be like God spiritually. So that's the whole idea of being a spiritually. So what is that idea? So that idea is from Genesis 2:17. So we've seen that we're created. Adam's created in a twofold process. So first, God creates him out of the ground, and then secondly, Genesis 2:17, we see, we'll just read this, and the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. So that's how we're alive. And in that way, how we're alive, we're like, our purpose is to be like God, to do things that God can do, not in the same way, but in a likeness. So basically what we're saying is, and this is where the word destruction comes from, without that, there's no purpose. And this is what we see in the story of Cain and Abel, that basically Cain and Abel both come up from the ground. We studied that, so we won't reiterate that. But when Abel gets killed by Cain, his blood goes back to the ground. So our purpose of life is, and this is the thing, we all experience the same thing. Most of us aren't murdered. Hopefully, none of us. Well, hopefully, we won't be murdered. But basically, our blood comes out of the ground and it goes back to the ground. Ultimately, in that spiritual, abstract idea. So, what life's about is the bit in between. So we start out from the same thing. We return from the same thing. Life, existence, is about what happens in between. So actually, what we do is we give life to the world. And by giving life to the world creates meaning. And I think that's going back to what we said, why we're studying this is because we're in this season with coronavirus. It's like that's been redefined. Life's been tipped upside down. And again, really, why we're studying this, so we can really find out what life's really about in this season and out of the season, because it doesn't change, and give meaning. And when we have meaning, we have purpose. And then basically a lot of things happen, but for one, we feel a whole lot better about ourselves than we do currently. So actually, we give life to the world, and then creation's purpose is fulfilled by that. The Bible clearly speaks about that. So Paul in Romans 8 says, which is quote this, we know that the whole creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth right up to the present time. Not only so, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, grown inwardly, so wait eagerly for our adoption to sonship, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we were saved. But hope that is seen is no hope at all. Who hopes for what they already have? So that's basically our hope. That's what Paul's talking about. But he's basically getting that knowledge of what he's saying from what we study. Okay, that we give life and meaning to the world. And Paul's a Hebrew, and probably in the concept of what we're actually talking about, just for this slide, is the Hebrew of Hebrews. He would have understood that clearly. So the purpose of blood is to provide life. So what happens with our blood? So practically, concretely, without oxygen, we're dead, destruction. And this is what happens to to Abel, not Cain, when Cain kills Abel. He's not allowed to be, because obviously can't live, bodily speaking. So spiritually, um, that oxygen is from the ruach, from the spirit. So we're dead spiritually, and that's what silence looks like. So that's where we kind of got to with these ideas. So we'll look at the story of Cain and Abel. So what we also found out is that the seed itself reproduces after itself. So we studied the word seed at the beginning. So what I find from the parable of the sower is the seed in Jesus' story of the parable of the sower is the word. So it behaves like any other seed. And this is why Jesus is using this illustration of seed. He says, defines to the disciples that what is they ask, why is it? He says the seed is the word. That's what he says. So therefore, the word reproduces after itself and gives life in the same ways that we've been discussing. So when the seed in Abel is spilt by Cain, we see these abstract and these concrete ideas clearly demonstrated. And again, this is why the story is in Genesis 4. So going into that idea that we discussed, why that story's there. So this is kind of, we're not going to again fully introduce this story, but in the next 2 or 3 videos we will finish introducing this concept. So basically just think of it as first bound. So when something's first discussed in the Bible, it defines it forever. And actually that's not even a Hebrew, that's a Christian concept, Christian theological concept. And again, why is that so? Because the seed itself cannot change. So if once something is abstractly defined in the Bible, like a physical seed, it being a spiritual seed, it cannot change how it's defined. We don't necessarily think of it like that, but that's what the Bible is teaching us. So if we want to then go back to something theologically, we just look at the first found, the first time something occurs. So this is kind of why we're looking at the word prophet. So this is actually introducing a new idea. And I know, yes, we've introduced a lot of ideas already, and this is only the third video, but actually the whole point is these ideas are very simple to understand. So something new to introduce to you, which you won't know. We're not going to dwell on this, but actually the Hebrew language is itself completely constant in everything. It is from the beginning of its beginning or its creation to now. The only thing that's different is actually 3 alphabets. So we're used to the modern Hebrew on the right, so that's the modern Hebrew. That's the word for brother, by the way. I think it is pronounced. So it's an aleph and a het. So this is the third. We're not going to talk about the second. And on the left's the picture graph, which is the first. So this is the point of this. Originally, Hebrew, the Hebrew alphabet, the symbols, the Hebrew alphabet itself has always stayed the same, but the symbols that use the alphabet are different. So this is the first symbols, and it's actually pictures. It's very much like Egyptian hieroglyphics at the beginning of Egyptian hieroglyphics, before it got overcomplicated. Actually, in fact, scientifically it's been proven that there was some overlap at some point. So scientists say there was never a people called the Israelites or the Hebrews in Egypt. There was no Moses, there was no Exodus, but actually what we find is both the Egyptian and Hebrew alphabets, just in there, the way they are, and using symbols as letters, basically pictures as letters, were highly similar fact, there's not much about them that is different, though they all have differences. They're too similar to be that just to be an occurrence. So obviously that leads to things that we don't even need to say, which are natural. The fact they came from the same origin. Um, so um, you've got in the picture graph the exact same. So you've got the, again, Hebrews right to left. So we've got the Aleph symbol, which is an ox, and we've got the Het, which is wool. So what does Aleph mean? It means ox. What does Het mean? It means wool. So the terms that we still have for the letters of the alphabet still relate to the original pictures. So basically, we have two pictures. What do those unique pictures mean? So the Aleph is a sign of ox and is usually referred to as strength and is a picture of God. So a lot of the descriptions of God begin with an Aleph, like Elohim. Actually, though you wouldn't know it, but Elohim begins with an Aleph, and you can see that in the interlinear if you go back to the first. Well, you find Elohim anywhere, but Genesis 1:1, Elohim spelled with an Aleph, which you can see in the interlinear by this Aleph symbol in the modern Hebrew. So it means strength. So the strength of the field was basically ox. And obviously the field then is an important concept within Hebrew culture and Hebrew thinking. The Het's a wool and basically refers to protection. So the term brother, where does that come from? Literally, if you take those two symbols and put them together, it means strong protection. So this is what we get in the story of Cain and Abel. The story of the first two brothers. And a brother, the word for brother is actually strong protection. So we just reviewed that. If you've got any questions, go back to the group and ask them. Please feel free to ask whatever you want, whatever. But I think we basically recapped everything we need to do. You can always go back and review. So now we're just into our second part of this video. We're just doing a recap of the word brother, how we've done it typically. So the etymological meaning is unity or bring together. So already we found a problem with the story in Cain and Abel, because obviously, how can you say Cain and Abel were at all brought together or unified when one kills the other? So again, we're given richness. So definition 1, being related. So Genesis 13:8, and in the screenshot here, or the little picture from the interlinear, we can see at the end of the second line. So obviously, again, Hebrew is right, left, so it's on the very left, the term brothers. So we've got the Aleph and the Het there. We've got a Yod and a Mem, bringing as a suffix, so giving it plural. So simple. Move on. Definition 2, togetherness, brotherhood. So the idea of what brothers are about. So this is from Zechariah 11:14. So again, the screenshot at the beginning of the second line, the brotherhood. So the, obviously, prefix ha, sorry, prefix hey, pronounced ha. So ha, ahala would be something along the lines of the, and I know, yes, very bad pronunciation. So we've got the ha, the, as I've said, the aleph and the het, and then we've got a fav and a hey for hood as a suffix. So definition 3, actual brother and sister. So you can see that 251 brothers, exactly the same as what we've covered before. So know what we said about sexist language, that in English, yes, Bible's sexist, in its original Hebrew it's not. So again, everything has to be gender related in Hebrew. It's either got to be male or feminine, masculine or feminine. It can't be neuter. So brothers obviously is masculine, feminine is masculine. Sorry, feminine is feminine is sisters, masculine is brothers. Don't know how I got that mixed up, but I did. So typical way you'd treat a Hebrew feminine letter, so you add a suffix on the end. So I think actually, I'm pretty sure I'm right, although I could be wrong. In brothers, they add a tav rather than a hey to make it feminine. But the point is, it's the same root word for brothers and sisters. It's not a different word like it is in English. And again, that's from Genesis 14:5. So this is an interesting concept. So again, why are we doing this? To bring out these ideas that we wouldn't naturally associate with the meanings of words. So definition for meadow or grass growing close together. So this is Genesis 41:2, and transferred reads. Why is this? Why is reads this idea here? And why is it the term brothers? So reeds is just a type of grass. Obviously, in context, it's grass, or it's grass-like, growing by the side of a river rather than in the field. As you can see, again, among the, so we've said bet, prefix for in, it's also the prefix for among. So what's in the house, because obviously bet means house. Not sure we covered that or not anyway, but it does. Like aleph means ox and het means wool, so we have the prefix of the bet, and then we have the aleph and the het, and then vav. So definition 5, and this is one of the things you oddly find in Hebrew. I think it's just a characterization of the culture related to just comic value, basically. So the definition is exclamation of joy at another's misfortune, which obviously is a brother. There's no person you're related to that you exclaim joy at their misfortune more than a brother to a brother. Even brother to a sister or sister to a sister doesn't really happen like brothers happen. So it's just one of those things. Obviously, that's not to contradict what we said before about brothers and sisters in Hebrew. So anyway, so you can see that there, 1, 8, 8, 9. Aha, literally you can see the aleph and the het and the tet. So that's actually making it feminine, I think. Though I'm not entirely sure. No, it's not. Forget what I just said. It's got a prefix of a hey, I just misread it. And then the aleph and then the het. So literally, so let's read that then, because obviously the prefix of the hey means the. So, and they opened wide against me their mouth and said, the aha. That's the literal translation. So fireplace, this is from Jeremiah 36:23. So why fireplace? Again, a thing in Hebrew function, picture something. So a good picture of unity is when the family comes around at the end of the day, gets together, it's cold, so they all congregate around the fire. That's obviously a picture of brotherhood. So that's from Jeremiah 36:23, and it's translated the hearth. So again, a hey prefix, and then you have the aleph and the het. So can mean another or a second one. So this is an interesting one. So here, Exodus 26:6 is interesting. We wouldn't necessarily pull this out of the, well, we wouldn't at all pull this out in terms of an understanding from this verse. So you can see the term over here. So I'm just looking at. So on the first line, you've got in verse 5. Is it another? The word another. The Hebrew Strong's 269. So you've got aleph, het, and then I can't actually see that. You have a tav. So that might be making it feminine. I'm not entirely sure. Then looks like a hey. I can't quite see actually. Then on the second line, you've got the same root 269 translated with. So the whole verse is on the end of the second set, maybe clasp loops one to another, and you should make 50 cloths of gold and couple the curtains together with the cloths. So that's a mechanical translation. Again, we've already discussed that. So the word with is the same word. So you find this a lot. You have the same word, same root word, slightly different vowel points. So only one vowel point is different. So they're very slightly different, but actually they have a different translation in English, and that's not always correct. So here translates first another with. So the idea we spoke at the beginning of this slide is in terms of the concept we draw out. Obviously, this is the temple, how God's instructions on how to make the tabernacle to Moses. So we have this idea of the curtains and clasping one onto the other with loops, but the root word there that explains how to do it is like it's the term basically brother. So obviously the idea of unity. So this is the last one, I think. Yeah. So got the last definition. There's always some weird stuff in with what we're doing that you don't always know. I'll explain that in a bit. So this is actually an unknown animal. You can see it here. It's translated owls. It's probably not owls. In the concept of when you read this, you don't really picture owls. You don't see owls. You don't understand owls. It's perhaps a jackal or hyena. So it's obviously, if we're trying to understand what it could be, it's pretty much 99% likely to be something related to an animal that actually behaves like a pack of brothers together. So jackal and hyena suit that, owls doesn't. But this is from Isaiah 13, verse 21 anyway. So it's probably wrong. So why do we struggle? Well, it's slightly bizarre anyway. You've got it's probably translated about 1500, and it's a term way before that. You've got the point of it's originally written in Hebrew. Someone's translating it who's English, or at least Western, however that's come down the line. So they really didn't think, what should that word be? Not sure. I think it's owls. The real trouble is there are one or two things that are they're minor because they're just one or two. That is, they're in the Bible once or twice, and you don't get the full concept, which is the point of why they're minor. So major stuff's mentioned a lot. You might not be able, someone might not be able to look at a verse and see the Hebrew and go, what's that? I don't know, but they'll be able to see it in another verse and go, now I understand what that means. You can't do that when it's mentioned once or twice, and this term's only mentioned once in this way. It's just like we don't really understand it fully, but that's the definition anyway. So the important thing we've seen is the idea of unity and bringing it together, but actually the picture of a meadow or grass coming close together in definition 4. So that obviously relates entirely with what we're looking at in the concept of the way we're looking at it, but also the story of Cain and Abel. So this is Genesis 4. So I'm not going to dwell on this. So we pretty much covered everything in the Cain and Abel. So again, first found what we're saying. We haven't looked at the story and tried to understand it, but we tried to understand the words without looking at the story. So we should naturally understand it. Just that. Just what we understand then match with what we're seeing in the story and how we understand the story. Yes, it does. Does it contradict? No, it doesn't. So we don't really need to cover the story. But if we wanted to, we could try and do the reverse of what we've done. So we look at Cain and Abel first and say, this is kind of what we understand, and then look at the words and more fully understand what we understand from the story. So the important aspects, I think we've got to highlight or add from what we've already covered is Abel's blood cries out to God. So one of the definitions of blood is silence. So even when the blood's silence, to God, it's not silent. That's obviously related to who God is. So the other interesting point is Cain works the ground. Obviously, God tells him that's going to be hard, and so ground's the word Adamar again. So relate to the, it's from the root word Adam. So literally, what is the issue then? Again, this is something we wouldn't necessarily, the act of spilling blood on the ground makes the ground itself unfruitful. Yeah. So in context, that could both be concrete and abstract. So obviously, it's first concrete, like that ground that actually Abel's blood was spilled into is now literally practically unfruitful. But actually, it makes the whole of creation unfruitful because of what Cain did to Abel. So interesting as well. We covered the word brother, and this is why we covered the word brother, in case you didn't realise. So Cain tells God, "Am I my brother's keeper?" So we'd say no, but actually in Hebrew understanding, yes. Just the word brother. He's supposed to be his brother's keeper, but he wasn't. Okay, so that's this video done. That's the whole study of the word ground. So I think we are doing fields and possibly word in the next video. So stay tuned for that. Thank you.